This conference will now be recorded.
All right, good morning, everyone. Again, we're going to get started in about another minute. Just want to give those who are slow to log in a chance to get logged in. You know, a lot of people are coming from one meeting to another, so we will get started in about a minute. As you note, this is going to be recorded for future use. Sure. All right, so looks like we've had some slowing of signing in. So good morning and welcome to AES training, Conehead Termite Eradication. Once a Coneheadache, now a light at the end of the tunnel. We are recording this for this session for future use. So we ask that you please mute your microphones and phones, and please turn off your webcams during the presentation. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the chat feature, and we will ask these questions during certain times during the presentation. We have CEUs that are approved for this webinar. You can receive one CEU for these categories: regulatory pest control, regulatory inspection and sampling, and commercial termites and other wood destroying organisms. Contact your supervisors or sue for the record of attendance. And please note, you must attend this seminar for a minimum of 50 minutes to receive CEUs. And just a quick overview on what we are going to be talking about today is the Conehead Termite Eradication and the achievements that these two lovely ladies have gone through and their successes. So sorry, I lost my train of thought on that. So we have Sue Allspaw, who is our program coordinator. And she is has been working with Conehead Termites since 2011, starting out as a volunteer, and has joined AES in 2014 to take on the job of program field coordinator. So she has a Bachelor of Science in Biological Science, is a certified applicator in regulatory pest control, and has experience before joining FDACS in project management, contract oversight, and environmental planning. We have Katie Ten, who serves as our field entomologist for the Conehead Termite program, and she's been with us since December 2016. She has a master's degree in entomology from Penn State and a bachelor's degree in biology from Kalamazoo College. Her background is one of my favorite things: native pollinator conservation, yay! So, organic agriculture and environmental education coordination. We are excited to have both of these ladies talk with us today and share their wealth of information on Conehead termites. So are y'all ready?
Yes.
All right,
thank you.
Go ahead and get started.
All right, good morning, everyone. Again, like Mara said, I'm Katie Ten. I'm the entomologist, or field entomologist for the Conehead program. And we're just going to be giving you a little overview of some of the exciting things that we've done for the last few years with the process of eradicating the Conehead termite. So first off, we're going to talk about what our goals are for today and what we'd like for you all to get out of this webinar. Our number one goal for this and for every outreach presentation that we give is to, the sound is bad, sorry. I'm going to keep talking. You guys let me know if my sound gets it better.
You sound fine.
Okay, I think we shut the webcams off. That should help. Okay, so our number one goal for all outreach presentations is to make sure that as many people in the audience and the public is aware of what to look for Conehead termites, what we'd like to keep your eye open for in the field, how to identify them, how to report them to us. And this is our main purpose for the program, and making sure that it is a success. The more eyes in the field is always what we're looking for. In addition, we're going to talk a little bit about some fun aspects of the Conehead biology and how those aspects of their biology impact some of the policies and procedures that we do with our program. And then I'm going to swap it over to Sue, and Sue's going to focus a little bit more on the specifics of our program itself, some of how we do our surveys, our treatments, and the outreach proportion of our protocols as well. And then we're going to give you a little bit of a goals for continued success for the eradication program moving forward from here. So first off, what is a basic overview? What is a conehead? Well, conehead is the common name for the species of termite. It's Nucidotermes corniger. It is an arboreal termite, meaning that it nests in trees above ground, so it's not a subterranean and it's not a drywood termite. Those are the two main categories that you hear most often, especially when referred to termites in this area or in Florida. It is a social insect, which means it has a caste system. There are kings and queens that do all the reproduction, and workers and soldiers that are in charge of working and defending the colony. It is native to South and Central America and has very broad feeding preferences. It will eat basically anything made out of wood. So here, for reference, if you're visiting us or joining us from all across the state of Florida right now, we are down here in Broward County, Southeast Florida, where the only known populations of conehead termites have ever been established in the continental United States. So that's very important for where we're focusing at the moment. But here is the native range of the conehead termite, which is Central America, South America, and a lot of the Caribbean islands. So you can see that while Florida does not fit into this nice yellow box, we are very close to it, and it makes sense that they were very easily able to establish populations in our region. So how to identify a conehead termite? These are the basic caste systems, individuals for the species. You'll see the soldiers on the left and the workers on the right. And in the center are the swarmers, or what we're officially known as alates, as well as some of the immature alates with the little smaller wings. But right now we're focused on the soldier caste. That is where the name conehead termite comes from. You can see the very distinct conehead, dark pointed head shape. And that is how number one way to identify this species from the soldier is to look for the shape of the head. So as you can see, another view here of the conehead soldiers with their dark teardrop shaped heads, and they do not have any apparent mandibles sticking out. They have very, very reduced mandibles. Instead, their defense system is a chemical defense. So they spray their enemies with a pine sap-like chemical instead of trying to chomp at them with their mandibles. Here are some other species that do have large mandibles, and that's sort of a quick way to tell them apart. These are both subterranean termites. The Formosan termite on the left is another invasive species that you may have heard of, and the eastern subterranean termite is one of our native subterraneans. But in real life, the soldiers and the workers for this species are really quite small. They're only about the size of a grain of rice. And this is why, for the rest, we're going to go on and talk about some of the other types of structures that we use to locate them in the field instead of looking for the individual termites themselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about the swarmers, also known as alates. And these are the flying reproductives that are released this time of year in the spring for a lot of different species of insect. So here's a sort of quick how-to to identify the termites versus an ant. An ant can also be, bees and wasps and anything else that's in that group of insects. But if you things you want to hone in on are the wings of equal size, so the front and back wings all the same length, and does it have a constricted waist or not? So termites, if you're looking at the individual insect, looks like one big cylinder, does not have a constricted waist portion, and that's a good way to say I'm looking at a termite versus a flying ant. So with the conehead termite, the alate swarmers have these dark charcoal colored wings, which is another thing that's very unique to the species in Florida, and one of the things we really want people to hone in on when they're keeping their eyes open for this species. So for example, here is a sticky card of trapped insects that we've conducted down here in South Florida. And on the sticky board, you'll see a couple of Formosan termite alates, and they have sort of a clear, maybe light honey colored wings, and you can compare that to the charcoal colored of the conehead. So if anybody ever came across something with these dark charcoal colored wings, please let us know. That's something we would want to investigate further in that area. So now I'm going to move into how to identify them when we're in the field itself, when we're walking around. The three things that we focus on are tunnels, nests, and then the soldiers themselves. We just talked about the soldiers, so we're going to focus now on the actual structures that they build. And the number one thing that we focus on, or I focus on specifically when I'm out conducting a termite survey, is looking for these tunnels. So what is a conehead tunnel? The tunnels are about 1/2 inch in diameter. They are essentially like mud tubes or hollow straws is how I like to describe them to people, because they really are, they're like little termite highways that they use to move between their nest location and wherever it is that they're feeding. And they build these tunnel networks, crossing everything that gets in between their food and their nest. And they can be very large networks, interconnected. But I like the straw analogy because they hold their shape when you break them. They're very easy to take your fingers and brush right across the tunnel and it'll open right up. But if you're looking at it on a cross section, it kind of looks like you're looking at the top of a straw. And that's something that is very helpful to me to identify this is a conehead tunnel versus some other species. So here's just a couple of examples of conehead tunnels on trees. And keep in mind, every picture that I'm going to be showing you is from Florida. They're all Broward County photos. So in these images, you can see the red arrows are just pointing at some of the termite tunnels in these photos. And on some trees, they're very easy to locate, depending on the color and the texture of the bark. Like the center photo is a sea grape, and those are relatively easy to stand out, versus something that more like an oak tree, or in this case, a mango tree on the far right. They can blend much more easily into the texture of the bark, and they may not be quite as easy to notice without closer inspection. But the tunnels do not go just up wooden trees and objects. They really climb up anything that's in their way between point A and point B. And so here are some examples of tunnels on man-made objects. So the one on the left is a metal chain link fence with a nice tunnel going right up and underneath the top rail. The center is not a power cord coming out of the air conditioning unit. It is in fact a termite tunnel. And the final photo is a stack of pallets where I've highlighted just a few of the termite tunnels, but in fact that whole pile is just covered in tunnels up and down. They really like the wood, the dry wood of pallets and tool handles and things of that nature. This is another of my favorite images. This is a 2-story concrete commercial building where just about every dark line that you see going up the sides of this building are termite tunnels. And so they really can go long distances and just trying to find new food sources. So they're exploring in all different directions of these tunnels. And then here's just a couple of close-up images of that sort of straw-like texture, what it looks like when you break open the tunnels. If they're an active infestation, you will see a good number of termites using the little highways, and so you can see soldiers and a couple of workers in these images. So you really kind of tell how active that location is by how many termites are in there. And you can still see the clear shade that I was referring to. And then the tunnel material, they use not just to build their actual tunnels, but they will also cover the feeding sites where they're at, and they put like the tunnel, I call it like a little tunnel roofing, so that they're able to feed in some comfort and from elements and from predators as well. So now we're going to talk a little bit about conehead nests. And like I said in the beginning, coneheads are arboreal termites. So they nest above ground. They are not subterranean. They produce globular carton nests, and carton is the material that they create. It is a dark brown sort of bumpy surface. So if you see the two photos here, the one on the left is a dead nest. It's an inactive nest. So you can see sort of the internal texture of the nest versus the one on the far right is a fresher, more active one where it has the outer bumpy covering. And the nests do harden with age. So a young, fresh termite nest is so soft you can take your fingers and push right through it, versus a older conehead nest that we have seen so hard that we can take it on, put it on the ground and jump up and down on it, and it won't go anywhere. We've had to take sledgehammers to a couple of nests to really destroy them properly. And Sue will talk a little bit more about that later. But they can be located just about anywhere. So I say arboreal, but they're not restricted just to trees, although they can be found on tree trunks, up in the branches, or at the base of the tree. Sometimes they are found on open ground, and other times we find them hidden in debris piles. So I like to kind of fit nests into two very basic categories, the ones that are relatively easy to locate, such as the ones in these images, or they're on trees, or this first one's at the base of a tree. And if you're, walking around in the woods or somewhere and you come across something like this, chances are that you're going to be able to see it and that you'll at least identify it as something out of the ordinary for that tree. But just as often, we find ones that are much more difficult to locate. And these are all actually on the same property, where we have the one that's hidden within a pile of logs. The center photo is actually the underside of a concrete stairwell. We had to backtrack a lot of tunnels to kind of figure out where that was originating from. And the final photo is slightly below ground in the root ball of a rather tall stable palmetto. And so this is slightly subterranean, but it's still right at that surface level. So that's why it doesn't really fit that category. And these are all just examples to let you know that when we're doing surveys, some of these nests take us a long time to locate, which is why the number one thing that we're really hunting for are the tunnel systems, because that is something that you're going to be able to see much more commonly. But just here, a couple more examples. These are some nests in structures, again in Dania Beach, or excuse me, not Dania Beach, Broward County. The first picture is actually, the utility room is that same concrete wall building that I showed earlier, where they were going up the two-story building. So that's what it looked like on the inside. And then in the roof rafters of an abandoned house. Here are some examples of nests that we found at the bases of trees. And you can see here that they will build their nests right around whatever vegetation is there, which is another reason that they can be very difficult to locate sometimes. And some other sort of interesting photos. One of our favorites is the nest in a boat wheel well. The center one is the end of a Brazilian pepper tree branch, or just sort of hanging at the end of the branch. And the final photo is a nest in a wood pile, or it's actually a pile of railroad ties, which we will talk about again in a little bit. And then the other important thing with nests to point out is that when they are very young, before they have reached a large number of colony members, they are found inside a specific piece of wood. So before they produce enough individuals to make that globular carton that sort of pops out, they will just be within in one piece of wood. So this makes young nests very difficult to locate, which again, we'll come back to in a moment. So just real quick, how to tell the difference between different types of insect tunnels. So the conehead termite tunnels are the one thing that we are really focusing on when we're doing the survey and looking for. But we also just like to make people aware that they are not the only insect, especially down here in South Florida, that produces tunnel-like structures. So here is an example of a big-headed ant on the left versus a conehead termite on the right. And the two big differences are one has ants and one has termites, but the texture is definitely something that we key in on for these. So I described the straw texture when you break a conehead termite tunnel. If you touch a big-headed ant, it just disintegrates. It's much more webby and very, very, very loosely held together. So there's no real structure to the actual tunnel. And then something else that we get often is, these are Formosan subterranean tunnels, but really a lot of subterranean termites do produce tunnels. The two big differences that we hone in on when we're looking at these is again texture. Formosan tunnels tend to be a little bit sandier, bumpier, not as uniform. You don't get that crisp, clean circle that you get with the coneheads. And they're typically shorter, smaller networks where they can go in and out of pieces of wood, as opposed to the long connected networks that could go up an entire tree for the conehead. So, well, these are something just to sort of keep in mind. We do not expect most people to be experts in identifying them just based on the tunnel itself. And we really focus on trying to find the individual insects and looking at the soldiers to determine what species that you're looking at. But also, please do not hesitate to contact us with anything that you're uncertain on. If you see tunnels and you see something and you think it's any possibility that it could be a conehead, we want to know about it. We would definitely prefer to look at dozens and dozens and dozens of things that turn out to not be coneheads than we would to miss one that is a possibility. So this is just an example, a real life example of why correct identification is so important. This is a public storage building, the very base of the wall at one of our sites in Pompano Beach. And these are conehead termite tunnels that were going into the building. But when the property managers called the pest control operators, they were told that they were subterranean termites. And so the treatment that they were going to enact was a subterranean treatment, which would not have been the correct treatment to work against the conehead species in this situation. So that's why you can't go just off of tunnels alone. You really have to find the insect. So just a real quick, how to contact us, like please report any possible sightings, any questions. If you'd like us to do presentations to any field groups or anyone else that you work with that you think would benefit from knowing a little bit more about the coneheads and how to look for them, please let us know. Here's a couple of options. We do utilize the DPI helpline quite often, especially with members of the public. That's the number that we give out, and they will route any potential conehead sightings to us for us to investigate. So thank you for that. So now a little bit why eradicating. So what is it about this species that allows our interest and focus on eradication? And it is because it's a pest of agriculture, it's a pest of natural areas and of structures. So in its native range, the conehead termite is a pest of fruit trees, including citrus trees, and other agricultural crops like sugarcane. So you can see why we would be concerned for Florida. Locally, while we've only seen it in small areas that have not included large agricultural regions as of yet, we have seen infestations in backyard fruit trees and many varieties of both native and non-native landscape plants, including grasses. And some of the largest infestations that we have seen to date have been in very heavily vegetated areas, including open spaces that could allow us to sort of conclude that if they were to get into someplace like the Everglades National Park, that it would be a prime area for conehead colonization. And then additionally, we have seen some structural infestation of this species, and they are considered a common structural pest in their native region. So while we tend to find them more often in the landscape than we do in structures, they definitely can be a structural pest as well. So why are we focusing on this species for eradication as opposed to, for example, the Formosan subterranean termite that I believe many of you would have heard of? And there's a couple of real specific reasons for this. The number one reason, or one of the big reasons, is that so far the conehead is only in isolated populations. So it's small enough that we can eradicate it versus something like the Formosan that is already spread statewide and outside of Florida for sure. And has really just gotten to a point where it's beyond total population eradication. Additionally, we have these above ground nests, which allow us to actually locate the whole colony and treat the whole colony at one time. And so that really makes it feasible for us to find them in an area, locate them, and get them all out of that area, as opposed to subterranean termites where they underground nest and are almost impossible to backtrack and locate that actual specific colony underground. And then for the FDACS perspective, we also do consider them to be a threat to our agriculture and natural areas. And this is one of the reasons why our department considers it a priority. So a little bit about the biology of the conehead termites that makes it unique and interesting. So a lot of termite species will have a single king and a single queen for each colony where they produce all the eggs, and that's how the colony grows. Well, conehead termites are well known for having multiple kings and queens in each colony. And here are just two examples of ones that we found down here in Broward County. You can see the numbers of kings and queens in each photo. And each one of these queens was producing eggs to expand that particular nest. And for point of reference, the one on the left in the Dania Beach. That was one of 26 nests that were located on one 2/3 acre property. It's a vacant residential lot in the city of Dania Beach. And so we had 21 queens in that nest, and that was just one of 26 nests that were found on that property. So you can see that they have very rapid growth, or potential for very rapid growth, and really can take over an area very quickly, which is one of the reasons they cause us a lot of concern. So here's just a real quick example of nest speed or nest growth. In 2017, we found this particular nest in Pompano Beach, and it went from basically not existing when I surveyed in April to finding it in October, December, and then January. And you can see that the nest itself basically tripled in size in approximately 3 months. And so that's really an indication of the multiple kings and queens in there producing a large number of individuals at once. Another one of the biological challenges that we have with the species is what we call the hidden colony period. And this is what I was referring to earlier when they have the young colonies and they're just in that single piece of wood. That it can take a minimum of 3 to 4 years and up to 7 or 8 years even for the colony to reach a sufficient size to sort of pop out and make that globular carton and the tunnels appear so that we can actually locate them on a survey. And so this is sort of a real life example of how that hidden colony period can impact our program. This is a survey site where we found active termites at the Tri-Rail, which is a commuter train station. And we treated a specific area of palm trees in 2015. And then for 3 years, we did surveys at least annually, if not more than that, and did not find any signs of termites on that property until 2018, where we found them in another group of palm trees just down the way. And this is very likely not a result of a new swarm, given the history of the surrounding area, but rather a young hidden colony that had been there sort of hiding the whole time. And here is that pop-up result that we found. You can see the tunnels going down the palm tree that we were able to locate on the survey because they were at eye level. And then we actually were able to find the nest itself. It was way up at the top of this tree, hidden in the boots of the palms. And fortunately for this location, it was reachable from that second story of the parking garage. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult to actually treat that nest. So what the other interesting aspect of their biology that makes them both eradication possible, which is the above ground nests, they also make it a challenge for us because those above ground nests are capable of being picked up and moved by humans. So some of these big possible means of spread that we focus on include bulk trash pickups and collections, power line company clearing operations, green waste disposal sites, and landscape and nursery companies that may be moving infested trees. And so this image is a pile of railroad ties that actually I mentioned earlier. It had the nest in the wood pile. This is what that pile looked like after it had gotten picked up from the infested location and transported to another nearby city, to a friend's house in 2015. And fortunately for us, we were able to have identified that that wood pile got moved, and we're able to sort of contact trace it backwards or forwards and figure out where it got moved to. So we were able to deal with that situation. But by the time we got there, which is only a few weeks, they had already moved the termites as well to the neighboring property. So there are 3 locations in Broward County where we have ever seen conehead termites. The Dania Beach is where we believe to be the epicenter. And so Dania Beach to Davie was that known human transport with the railroad ties that I just mentioned. But we also found them up in Pompano Beach, which is 13 miles north of the Dania Beach epicenter. And while we were discovering this, we presumed them to be human transport, but we really wanted to confirm that this was in fact a transfer of nests from one place to the other, as opposed to a secondary introduction. So we worked with our scientific advisor, Dr. Barbara Thorne, who helps us with this program in many, many ways. And she worked with some of her colleagues to do a genetic analysis study of individual nests from both Pompano Beach and Dania Beach, as well as some of the original nests that were found in 2001. And the results of this study are consistent with the fact that both locations were descendants of a single introduced colony, and that the spread across the Broward County was in fact through human transport of infested materials. So this study was excellent to support our program, and that really says that we got to focus on this human transport as a threat and a means for moving termites from one location to another. So what we know of these two movements from Dania to Davie and Dania to Pompano, there is a large possibility that they have gotten moved in the past, other places, or they could still be moved if they're areas that we're not knowing about now. And so this is where the eyes in the field aspect really comes into play, or the focus of our program really is right now outreach and education, and getting as many people as possible to know what to look for and how to identify termites, conehead termites, and how to contact us about it, so that we were able to locate any other possible unknown colonies. And with that, I'm going to pause for any questions. If anybody has questions on identification or reporting, and then we'll switch over to Sue about the program a little bit more.
Thanks, Katie. Compared to Formosan termites and drywood termites and subterranean termites, are conehead termites blind?
Oh, the blind. I do not know that is a specific answer, but I do believe that termites are not known for their eyesight. They do tend to move around using a lot of other chemical cues and such. So I can't confirm that, but I would say it is very likely that they are also blind.
And about how far do they fly during a swarm?
We do not have any specific studies that show the specific flight distance of the conehead termite, but we have based off of a lot of other very similar species. And so we use a 1/4 mile as a maximum flight distance as possibility. So it's very likely that they are flying less than a 1/4 mile, but that is the sort of maximum possibility that we work with.
So, and you touched on the tunneling and such. So you look at the conehead tunnels. I mean, you've been able to determine, I know I've been out, thankfully had the opportunity to go out in the field with you, and you've shown me the tunnels and things, but is that tunnel structure unique to a conehead termite?
Like I said, there are definitely other species that build tunnels. For what we're surveying in this area, the specific structure and quantity and sort of the large networks are unique to this termite in this area. Outside of Florida, I can't speak for that, but for what we're seeing in this area, it is unique.
All right, well, one last question, unless I have any others that come in. Do they have a specific tree species or wood preference, or are they just all or nothing, all or everything?
If it's made out of cellulose, they'll eat it. So we see them in a lot of Brazilian peppers, but I think that's an indicativeness of where the landscapes are that they've inhabited in Broward County. But we see them on a lot of different tree species, a lot of shrubs and bushes, like I said, native grasses, Fakahatchee grasses. We've seen them eating pallets and structure wood and cardboard boxes. So no, they have a very, very broad eating preference, and this is why they're one of our big areas of concern for the species.
This is Sue. I just wanted to add, I would say their favorite tree species are, as Katie said, the Brazilian pepper. Their second favorite, in my opinion, would be the the dead boots and flowers and fronds on the sable palmetto. But as he said, beyond that, they will go after anything made of cellulose.
All right. Well, Sue, perfect timing, because I don't have any other questions, and we're about at that 25-minute mark. So are you ready to go ahead and move forward?
I'm ready.
All right. So Sue, let's move on. Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
No problem.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to start off with is just where is the eradication program now? How is our progress going? So as Katie mentioned, we've got basically 3 cities where we've seen them in Broward County, and we found a total of 120 properties in Broward County that have had conehead termites on them since 2001. So where are we today? How many current properties do we have? The answer is, drum roll please, 0. And I do a drum roll just because I've been working programs since for 8 years. This is the first time that I have no place in Broward County where I can take people and show them live conehead termites. So we are just so excited about that. But you'll notice that that 0 has an asterisk next to it. And that is because 0 positive properties does not mean that they've been eradicated. Katie mentioned previously about how the young colonies can hide for quite some time within wood. So we have to continue going back to all these properties over and over again to monitor for young emerging colonies so that we can address them when they do pop up. Click. Okay, so real quick, I wanted to go through our program protocols. What is our program made of? How do we go about doing things? Our first here is surveys. Very important part of it's basically the backbone of our program. If we weren't out looking for them, we wouldn't be able to find them. Second of all, as soon as we find them, or as soon as we can, we treat them just to try to hit that population as soon as possible so that it doesn't continue to grow and spread. And then lastly, we do outreach. And Katie mentioned we're out here doing outreach so that we can get more eyes in the field so that people can help us find any not yet discovered colonies. Click. Okay, so I'll start with surveys. I'm referred to a previous positive, that is a property that has had conehead termites on it sometime in the past. So for those properties and those that are adjacent to it, we do several surveys within the first year after a treatment. And then we continue to go back annually, and that's to monitor for coneheads that could have potentially survived the treatment process. Then we also go out 1/4 mile from all previous positives, and we survey those once per year. The reason we have to go further out is that because of potential alate flights. We want to make sure that if a flight did occur, that we go out far enough to see where a new colony may have landed and set up. Click. Katie mentioned the 1/4 mile survey boundary earlier, and it is a risk-based estimate, and again, risk-based estimate of the maximum distance a conehead termite could fly when swarming. And you'll see on this map, the yellow line is the 1/4 mile that goes out beyond the purple properties, which are the previous positives. This is Dania Beach, which has a lot more residential, or it has a lot of residential property, a few businesses, some open land, but that's what the 1/4 mile in Dania Beach looks like. Click. And here's the team that we had this year helping us to do the survey of the 1/4 mile. Katie and I cannot do this alone, so we asked for help, and fortunately we get a lot of people who are very willing to help, and we are so thankful for it. We get a crew of people that usually come in from Tallahassee, the Bureau of Inspection and Incident Response inspectors help out, the DPI Region 3 plant inspectors, and giant African land snail inspectors. And I want to point out the woman in the yellow shirt is Dr. Barbara Thorne, that Katie mentioned previously, who is the program science advisor, and she comes out every year and helps us with the expanded surveys too. Click. Okay, this is the 1/4 mile for around the previous positive up in Pompano Beach. You'll see the land use is a little bit different here, much more heavy industrial, commercial, lots of big heavy trucks, lots of dust, but we still need help because it's still a huge area encompassing that 1/4 mile. Click. And here's our team this year for the 2020 expanded survey in Pompano Beach. And you'll notice they're standing in front of some freshly delivered brand new Porsches. And that's because the Porsche dealership up in Pompano lets us use one of their parking lots for our staging area every year. Click. So we've also done surveys at green waste facilities here in Broward County, and we were able to do that because we had 2 new people added to our team for about 8 months this year. You'll see in the picture on the left is James, on the right is Sarah, and they're the ones that really made it so that we could get out to these green waste facilities. And we've been concerned about these because I can't remember if Katie mentioned it, maybe not, but, and I'll point out, but Pompano Beach probably started at a trash transfer station, which is right across the street from another heavily infested property. So we knew at that point in time that we really needed to go out and look at all of these waste receiving facilities. So we were able to survey 23 of those this year. Fortunately, we did not find any conehead termites on them. So we're really happy with those results. Click. We also were able, with James and Sarah, we were able to do agricultural sites that are located within 1 mile of previous positives. We did not have any of those up in Pompano, but we did have 7 down in Dania Beach. So we were able to survey those. They were plant nurseries, there was an herb farm, a couple of tree farms, and once again, fortunately, we did not find any conehead termites. Click. Okay, so we've talked about surveys. Now what I'd like to go on for talking about is the IPM treatments that we do once we do find them. Click. So we do an integrated pest management program. We do a physical destruction of nests and the termites themselves, but we also do very targeted pesticide applications. The termiticides that we most commonly use are Termidor, Ultracet, and Adonis. And some of the actions that we do in the field are approved through an exemption to an emergency use permit. And then we only do treatments within the landscape. We do not do any treatments within the structures. Fortunately, in Broward County, there haven't been that many structures where they've moved into structures. There have been some, including a half-acre property, half-acre size building up in Pompano Beach that had to be fumigated. But the majority of the work that we do, vast majority or the vast majority of the places we find conehead termites is in the landscape. Click. Okay, so first what we do is nest removal and destruction. We call it smash and spray. And again, this is an integrated pest management practice because the first thing we do is we dislodge the nest from the tree or whatever it's attached to. And then we lay it at the base of that item, the tree, and just smash it to smithereens. And this eliminates the vast majority, or it kills the vast majority of termites within that nest. So again, that's without termiticide. We're just doing a physical smashing. The advantage to this is disposal. Otherwise, we would have to probably, what we used to do is collect them and then put them in plastic bags, transport, either have the pile of bags fumigated, or one time we even put them in somebody's truck that they drove it to the fumigation company and they fumigated the truck. So it was really cumbersome. So this was a great way to improve the disposal problem. It's also a great way to just treat the entire nest. Click. The next thing we do is as soon as we pry that nest away from whatever it's attached to, we do a nest footprint treatment. And the reason we do this is that, as Katie mentioned, a young colony moves into just a piece of wood somewhere. We call it the host wood. That's where they develop the new colony. That's where they grow their population. And only at a point in time, when the population gets large enough, do they build that globular carton. Well, those access points into that host wood remain. So the minute that nest starts getting disturbed, the reproductives run back into those holes, making it much more difficult for us to access it. So as quickly as we can, we get in there and do a treatment. So where Raphael is pointing that sprayer, there was a nest that sat right on top of that spot. So he's treating those access points back into the tree. And here's another example in the lower left picture is why we are so concerned about the reproductives. We know that if we address those, we got a much better chance of addressing the entire colony. So we do whatever we can to stop reproductives from moving, flying, etc. Click. And then lastly, not lastly, sorry. We also treat any structure, tree, fence post, anything that has an active tunnel on it, we treat the soil at the base of it. And the reason we treat the soil and we do not treat the tunnel is that we want that tunnel to remain active so that it can push that the termites will continue to crawl down to the soil where they could potentially pick up the termiticide and take it back to the nest. For this purpose, we use what's called non-repellent termiticides. In other words, it does not repel the termite from it, so they will just readily walk right across it, pick it up, and take it back to the nest. The other reason we don't destroy the tunnels is that we use them as an indicator for follow-up monitoring. If we do a treatment and we go back a couple of weeks later and that tunnel is still active, then something's going on there. Either there's a nest up in the tree itself, or they're continuing to, they will move across the top of a canopy of trees. So we just use it as an indicator of where we need to go next or what we need to do. Click. And then we do foraging termites. We have often found, especially in a more heavily infested property, you will find conehead termites foraging throughout ground debris like crazy. And you can see the kind of situations we find them in. Here's Katie aspirating some coneheads from some ground debris, and look at what a mess it is. I mean, you know, for us to be able to find these is pretty difficult sometimes. But we do treat these foraging termites typically with Adonis, which is an imidacloprid, and it really works. It's quite effective on ground debris. Next. We've also done some fumigations. The picture in the lower left with the orange tarp is over the railroad ties in Davie that Katie discussed earlier. The top right is John Berquist rodding some Fakahatchee grasses in Dania Beach quite a few years ago at this point. But they set up nest in the roots, not down in the ground, but at the base of the Fakahatchee grass. And so to access them, we put a rod down into the center of that and treated it that way. The biggest thing that we would love to be able to do all the time are site cleanups, just because removing the food or foraging material and removing hiding places is the best thing that can be done for our treatment and surveys. Click. So so what I'd like to do is talk to you about our IPM treatments and give you one specific example that really succeeded well so far, and that's the Broward County School Board bus terminal up in Broward County. In 2019, that is the only property that has been positive, and you can see it in yellow at the bottom. That is the school board bus terminal. Click. So we found termites on the property in early 2016. The property is about 3.5 to 4 acres of densely overgrown Brazilian pepper trees, and the property is owned by the Broward County School Board. And these pictures are just a few examples of what we had to deal with in the first couple of years of the property. And the picture of me in the upper right, that my hand is on a nest, and you can see it, but you can also see how difficult it is in this kind of situation to even find a nest that big, and how easy it would be to pass it up. Click. So just a quick slide here. I just wanted to show you the yellow is the infested area, and you can see here the density of the Brazilian peppers that were on that property. Click. I also wanted to show you, this is a map Katie created. The blue lines are these trenches. They're about 3 to 5 feet deep. that made a lot of our lives a little bit more difficult just in the cleanup, and also us having to navigate these trenches. Click. So in the first few years, we were like, okay, what do we do? So the first thing we did was we worked with the Broward County Water Management, and they came out and removed all the Brazilian peppers along the right-of-way, along their canals, which was a huge advantage. We at least could get a little, a little closer in. But if you look at the picture on the left, on the right side of that picture is what was left of what still remained at the bus terminal property, just thick Brazilian pepper. Click. We also, the Florida Forest Service was a huge help to us. They came out and they shredded many of the Brazilian pepper trees, basically all the trees they could reach. They used flailing mulcher on a skid steer. And one thing I have really become good at in the last 6 months is terminology used by land clearing companies, because we had to figure out all kinds of ways to get this stuff taken care of. They also mowed the property for us 2 times. They cut down a huge infested mango tree, and just the shredding of the trees alone greatly improved access to the property. And a quick story on this, when they came through and did this clearing, Katie walked out to the property, spread her arms wide and turned in a circle and said, "This is the first time I've been able to stand up and turn like this." So again, it was nice to be able to walk across the property as opposed to crawl. But again, on the right of that picture is one of those trenches that they could not get to the Brazilian peppers without destroying their piece of equipment. So we still had problems on our hands. Click. I just wanted to share with you what the treatments went, just try to show you how infested the property was. These are our treatment sites in 2016, which aren't really that many, but it was partly because we just couldn't get back in there to find them and to get we could not get any power spray equipment back there. It was all done by handheld backpacks, which is very inefficient. And then here's 2017. As you can see, this is after the Florida Forest Service had done their clearing. Still tons of conehead termites everywhere. And then once again in 2018, they just kept coming. And even though those dots are bigger than in 2017, you can see we still had coneheads everywhere. In fact, in 2018, we treated 88 nests on that property alone. So obviously, we weren't making a whole lot of progress. We would have gotten there eventually, but it would have taken us quite a few years. And here again is early 2019. Once again, lots of coneheads everywhere. Click. So we had some ongoing challenges we had to deal with in early 2019. One of the big ones on the picture, you can see what was left of the tree shredding. So it didn't destroy the tree, it just shredded it, and some of the chunks were quite large. And they were shredded full of conehead termites in many instances. So we just had coneheads happy as could be in all this shredded material. We still had dead and dying trees along the trenches that were loaded with conehead termites, and they were hidden inside wood to where we could not treat them. You know, our liquid termiticides just did not access them. We still had lots of overgrown areas, lots of termite hiding places, and limited access for power spray equipment. So as I said before, we were going to be fighting coneheads on this property for many more years. Click. Then we got money, yay! Oh my goodness, what a wonderful thing that was when I got the call that we had been approved for some funding. So we were, with that money, we were able to add 2 new field inspectors. That was James and Sarah I mentioned earlier. We got extra money for outreach. But the biggest advantage, at least as far as the bus terminal is concerned, is that we got contractual services to do site cleanups. Click. So once we got the money rolling and got all the contractors on board, the first thing we had them do was they mowed the property, they weed whacked around all the trees, and they removed the vines from the trees. So now we started being able to see more of the property. Click. We also had them go out and hand collect the tree debris that was on the ground that generated from the Florida Forest Service shredding. All the material that was picked up off the ground was chipped and stored on site. And the reason, so this is another integrated pest management strategy, because the chipping process itself kills the majority of conehead termites that goes through that chipper. And it's partly because in the lower right, you'll see the chip size that we wanted. We were very specific on the kind of equipment that they used so that we got a small enough chip size that we felt comfortable that it would kill, that any termites that did make it through the process would either not survive the process, or if they did survive, would be so spread out that they could not find each other and basically reestablish a colony. Click. They also finished eliminating all the exotic vegetation on the property. They cut and chipped all the large trees. And again, that chipping process eliminated the coneheads in the tree itself. They shredded some dead palm trees. And I want to explain after, for some reason, once the first clearing took place, we had 15 sable palmetto trees die. And we know it wasn't from lethal bronzing because we had some researcher come out and look at them. But other than that, we don't know why they died. But all of a sudden, here we got this other problem. Go ahead and click, Katie, please. Oh, I'm ahead of myself. So, but anyway, so I'm going to talk about what we did with these palms in just a second. I wanted to explain all of the trees that were chipped, all of the vegetation that was chipped was put in piles on the property. And the piles were quite large. Unfortunately, I did not take a picture of them, but you can see one to the left. And we also let the piles sit on the property for about 5 months. What we wanted to happen was that the heat from the composting would also destroy any coneheads that could potentially have survived the chipping process. And then once before we ran out of money and we still had contractors on board, we had them spread all those chips out onto the property. So we did not remove any cellulose debris from this property. So that greatly minimized any or completely eliminated any spread to new locations. Click. Okay, so again, I was talking about the palms. So what we decided to do was we had this guy show up and he showed us a video of him taking down a mahogany. And I said, that's what we need. So here's how we ended up getting rid of the palms, dead palms. The reason he's pushing on the tree is that we asked him to do that just in case there were any raccoons sleeping down in there. We didn't want that to happen. So you can see how quickly he was able to get rid of those palm trees. And yeah, Katie's going to pause it, but he took that all the way to the ground, if not below the ground. And so that was a huge benefit because really our only other option with those was to cut them down, put them in a pile, fumigate the pile, transport them to a landfill, and then pay the disposal. So that saved us so much money, time, and greatly eliminated the chance of transport. Okay, so what is our success with this integrated pest management program? We have not seen any conehead termites on that property since June of 2019. And Katie and I have done 2 very thorough surveys, and we are not finding any conehead termites. So we basically silenced that population in 8 months. And you remember from those earlier slides, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, we just had coneheads all over the place. But by addressing that vegetation, it was really cut down that population. But we still have to continue our surveys because if there's a property where they're going to pop up, it's going to be that one. So, but just the fact that we have no conehead, we're not finding any live conehead is just such a thrill to both of us. Click. Okay, so outreach. Again, Katie said that one of the big things we're doing, I'm running out of time here, is try to get people to help us with finding colonies. We go after homeowners and residents. Pest control applicators are very important. Field inspectors like the DPI inspectors or landscape inspectors. We're really trying to focus on agriculture operations, and a big focus lately has been natural resource managers. Click. So we'll go out to make appearances and presentations. Here's Katie and Johanna Walsh at the West Palm Beach Home Show. I've given a couple of radio interviews. Click. I love our website, so we have information online. Katie recently co-authored the featured creature on Conehead termites, and not only was she a co-author, but basically we would not have a published featured creature if it wasn't for Katie. She pushed it, she edited it, she pushed it to the publishers. Click. And we do articles and newsletters. Here's the Everglades Cooperative Invasive Species Management Team, a group of natural resource managers here in South Florida. And Katie did one for the Florida Nursery Growers and Landscape Association. Click. Love social media, and thank you to DPI for posting that on their Facebook page and on their Twitter account. And recently we had an Instagram post. Okay, that's okay, Katie, go ahead. Okay, so what are our next steps? Where do we go? Well, we're going to continue surveying properties within that quarter mile until we feel that the risk of young colonies emerging is acceptable. We are going to continue outreach throughout Florida, but we also want to expand to states that are at high risk for infestation and potentially tap into some resources that could help us get the word out up there. If they're in anywhere else in the country, we don't want them coming back to Florida. We're going to continue to seek funding sources. Hopefully, FDACS has been wonderful for the program, so I'm not complaining. But if we can get a little extra money, that's always helpful. And then finally, we want to maintain existing partnerships and develop new ones to continue helping us implement the program. Click. So Conehead termite eradication, we're on the road to success. Let's do this together. And I'll turn it over to Mara.
Thank you, Sue. I am putting your email and phone number up for if anyone is interested in contacting you, if they find something or have any other questions. But we do have a few questions. When did you start the year, or when do you know when the eradication program started in Florida?
Well, the first find of conehead termites was back in 2001. They started treating them 2 years later in 2003, and then continued to treat them. They would basically go back to the same properties where they had found them and eat anything they found. But then AES rebooted the eradication program in 2012. And we brought Dr. Barbara Thorne on at that point, who really helped us in focusing on good strategies for eradicating them. And so really hardcore, successful eradication activities have been occurring since 2012.
Nice. You have done a great job in being very focused on this. And I don't think we would have had the success without both of your dedication to this. Money helps, but your speaks volumes. Why you we've talked, you and I, about shredding the wood and chipping the wood and having it at a certain size. You had the picture with the chopstick. Why so small? Why can't would the conehead still eat that?
They definitely will eat that, but again, we felt that the smaller the chip, the number one, less chance that they will survive the chipping process. So that was the number one reason for why we wanted a smaller chip size. We learned through the shredding, the earlier shredding of the trees, that you leave large enough pieces of wood, or you make it so that the chipping process doesn't, they can survive a lot. These things have been on this planet for 3 million years, so you really got to get ahead of them. So we learned through that shredding that we had to have small chip size. And from what we can tell, it was very successful. So.
All right, and then now is your chance if you have any questions to ask. Use the chat feature. Sue, you wanted to bring your video camera, your webcam up for a little bit.
Here I come.
So one last question that I know I have is referencing, and I don't know if Katie or you have the answer, about what is the lifespan of these termites? How long can a colony live for?
Well, I don't have the exact answer to that, but basically they are on this planet for survival. That's their only one goal in life, is that colony to procreate. We have nests, as Katie was mentioned, the harder the nest, the older the nest. We do not know how old exactly, and Dr. Barberthorn may have a better idea of a typical lifespan of a colony, but they can live a long time. They were probably in Dania Beach quite a few years before they were found in 2001. And from the size of the nest that we saw and the hardness of the nest in Pompano Beach, they were also up there. They were probably up in Pompano Beach almost the entire time that we've been fighting them in Dania Beach. We just hadn't found them yet.
That's why many eyes is very important, and why we want to educate as many people so we can have more hands looking, more eyes looking. Well, I appreciate everyone outside of Sue and Katie who have provided assistance in our expanded surveys, and even in getting these working to eradicate these colonies, DPIs, employees, BIRs, assistants. I know you even had some employees from the Bureau of Licensing and Enforcement and coming out and help as well. So everyone who participates is greatly appreciated, and even the volunteers in Broward County that assist. So it's always fun when we get a report of a potential conehead that's not within Broward County. We get a little excited, and then it's like, and then happy when it's not.
And Mara, I also wanted to point out that DPI also did treatments for us. They're the ones that those 88 nests. So DPI has been phenomenal.
Yes. So, all right. I don't see any other questions, Sue. I appreciate everyone who called in and attended today. I hope you were able to get some wonderful information on a successful program, or what we feel is a successful program. And we appreciate everyone's support. I hope you have a great afternoon and the rest of the day. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Katie. We're going to go ahead and end the recording at this time.